Today I'm going to tell a story of a trip I took to the Tonquin Valley. Um, I've been there twice. It's in uh, it's in Alberta, Canada, and the first time I went, I think it was 2006, and Catherine and I went. And in planning the trip, I saw photos of the Tonquin Valley, of the ramparts, on Flickr, and they were so beautiful. And then I read that Ansel Adams had visited the Tonquin Valley and photographed the ramparts, and I saw his photos, and I thought this was looked like just a great place to go. Um, and Catherine saw the photos, and she thought it looked like a great place to go as well. But as she read about it and saw that the Tonquin Valley is not just known for the beautiful views of the ramparts, but is also quite well known for the, uh, the the high concentration of mosquitoes that can be encountered there. And she's not enthusiastic about mosquitoes, but she's does pretty well in backpacking and roughing it. So she was still willing to go. And then she read that grizzlies could be quite active in the area, and she has nothing against grizzlies. She would rather view them on television, though, than in person, and really doesn't want to challenge herself with viewing grizzlies in person. But she was still willing to go. And then, in getting some more information, um, I found that one of the bridges that crosses a river was out, and that river would have to be forded. And this exceeded her capacity for roughing it, and she decided that if I still wanted to go on this part of the trip, that she would monitor me from a bed and breakfast somewhere in the Jasper area. So on the appointed day, after spending a couple of days in Banff and that area, we drove up the Columbia Icefields Parkway, and about 20 miles, 20 kilometers south of Jasper is the trailhead. And Catherine was not just worried for herself, but as as a wife and a mom, she was worried that I was going to be eaten by grizzly bears, and was quite concerned about that, about me hiking alone on the trail. And so she was delighted to see, as we pulled into the parking lot, that there was a car, and there were two people on the back of the car putting boots on and whatnot. And so as we pulled up, she jumped out of our car and asked if they were going the same place I was, the Wates-Gibson hut. And they said, yeah. And they said, well, can my husband hike with you so that, bears don't get him? And they said, fine, if he can keep up with us, that's fine. But there was a third person with them, so there's a couple, and then there was a guy. And as the guy came around from getting out of the car, he said to her, the trail's very well marked. He'll have no problem finding the cabin on his own, which was a first clue. So I said goodbye to Catherine and got my pack, which was about 60 pounds, which is a pretty heavy pack. And we started down the trail, the single guy, and then the husband, and the wife, and then me. And as we're starting down the trail, I started chatting, finding out who they are and what they're about and whatnot. And so within about 100 yards, I find out that she's a pediatric cardiologist, and he's her husband's anesthesiologist. And he runs marathons, and she runs half marathons. And we're basically trotting along at my fast walking pace. Now, I'm a very fast walker, so this is pretty good clip. So we got 5 kilometers, and we come to the first bridge that crosses the Astoria River. And on the other side of the bridge, they stop and take off their packs. So I take off my pack, and I pull out a camera and I'm taking some photographs of the river. And I look up and I see their butts headed down the trail. So I stuff my camera back in my pack and I put on my pack, and now I'm jogging to catch up with them. And it had rained for 2 or 3 days prior to the day that we were on this trail. And this part of the trail is flat, fairly flat, and runs along the Astoria River and is shared with horses, with pack animals, servicing 2 lodges that are in the ramparts in the Tonquin Valley. So every 20 or 30 feet, there's a large mud puddle, which you can either find stones to hop through or around the edges or go through. So I'm jogging along, trying not to get totally soaked. I catch up with them, and then we go another 5 kilometers, and we stop again, and they take off their packs. So I say to, I'll call him the fearless leader, the single one at this time, is this, should I take off my pack? Are we going to be here for a couple minutes, or is this like last one? He says, oh no, we're going to put on some some gaiters and have a little snack, because it gets much tougher from here. So I have a little snack, I get ready to go. Once we cross the river, we're away from the horse trail at least, but it does get much narrower and much rockier, and there still is wet, and it's a pretty nasty trail. So we go almost another 10 kilometers, and we're only doing like 23 kilometers, so maybe it wasn't 10, but we didn't have all that much left to do, and they stop again. And I stop, and I'm resting, and we're chatting, and I said, well, I feel a bit like I'm on the Baton Death March, and I think I'm just going to go at my own pace from here. This was only about 11 o'clock in the morning at this point. I said I didn't plan to be at the cabin before about 2 o'clock anyway, so I'm just going to take it at my own pace. Fearless leader says, oh, don't worry, you won't be there before then. Says it's much steeper after this. It's not that encouraging. He says, by the way, what's the Baton Death March? And I said, well, I thought it was like an international thing, but maybe it's just an American thing. And I explained the Baton Death March to him a bit. And then the husband pipes up, yeah, no, I've heard of it. I know what you're talking about. So we get to the cabin, and the cabin's great. There's the 3, the couple and the leader, who I've now discovered once I'm at the cabin. He's a professional mountain guide that they've engaged to go glacier walking. So this is a paid deal. When I mentioned that, you were going rather fast and probably would have run into a bear before they ever heard us, they admitted that they were trying to ditch me. And then there was a couple from Colorado who had bagged all of the 11,000 plus peaks in Colorado, and they were walking around. And then there was a foursome. I think it was 3 guys and a girl who were climbers. They're there to climb, and I was the only one, the solo there. So we're having we all had a good time. The professional mountain guide and I were the only 2 that drank single malt, so we bonded a bit, and that's why I got quite a bit more information from him about the whole affair. And I had some great hikes. Didn't see a bear. I saw a bear scat, and I almost ran into a moose, but had a great time. And the guide and his couple left after a couple of days, and I had another day after that, 2 days after that. And I had gotten up in the middle of the night and gone down this horrendous trail to get shots of the ramparts at dawn, and got some of the nicest shots that I've ever taken. And I'll put a link to my photos from this trip on the in the comments below. So I had done that. I'd gone out in the middle of the night, shot this wonderful scene of dawn on the ramparts, and come back. Just had a peak experience, and I was scheduled to pack out the next day, which is, I wasn't looking forward to that. And I thought, this is going to be a day of rest. I just had this wonderful experience, and I'll hang around the cabin and not do much of anything. And it turned out that the climbers were having a down day. They were not going out climbing. They were having pancakes when I got back in the morning. And the couple was off. So I was sitting there, and the door opens, and a guy kind of stumbles in. Okay, I said good morning. He fumbled in his backpack, and then he spilled about, a baggie's worth of granola on the floor. Then he went over to the water, which is filtered from the lake, which is right there, and proceeded to leave that open, and so now we have a puddle of water on the floor. And then he asked me if we've got a telephone. So we're over 20 kilometers from the nearest road. There's no cell towers up there. There is no phone. I said, no. He said, well, could you help me carry my companion up? She's having a bit of trouble breathing. And that kind of got my attention. I said, well, she's having trouble breathing. You might not want to take her further away from a road. And so I come to learn that this guy has this woman they've just met, and they are coming in on a backpacking trip, and she's having a bit of trouble breathing. And so now the climbers have gathered around, and we're discussing what should be done. And I'm kind of hanging back because we've got these 4 climbers and myself and this guy, and no one knows what to do. So I have to credit my experience in Boy Scouts for this, but I did know what to do. There was some trail crews working in the area, and they typically have a satellite phone. And there's a warden's cabins. If the warden's there, they've got a satellite phone. So I said, okay, here's what has to be done. 2 people need to go with him back to her and see what the situation is, and see if they can get her to somewhere where she can be taken out, either by horses or a helicopter. And 2 people have to go and find the trail crew or the warden and call in the appropriate, authorities. And I'm thinking, oh God, I really don't want to do, a 16-kilometer hike today when I've got a backpack out tomorrow. And one of the climbers pipes up, we've got this. You've done the hard work here by figuring this out, and we'll split up and we'll take this from here. I'm like, I really thought about arguing with him, and I decided, no, I won't argue with him. So off they go, and I had a lovely day, and I awaited their return. And first, the 2 come and report they found the trail crew. They called it in. They're sending out a helicopter. So then we wait for the other 2. The other 2 come back, and they tell us, the story is, this guy who is an emergency room doctor, a cardiologist by training, and an emergency room doctor, had never met before, and they had planned this trip. I guess it was a computer dating thing, and within 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers, she started having trouble breathing. When they figured out that they weren't going to be able to make it all the way in, they pitched the tent by the side of the trail and got in, and then were so worried about bears that they armed their bear spray, which went off in the tent. Probably not real good for somebody who's already having trouble breathing. So when they got back down to her, they were able to get everything packed up and get her down to about where the trail branched off between the horse trail again on the other side of the river in a clearing. And a helicopter came in. And the helicopters assessed her, and they had told her they're going to send somebody, either horses or helicopter. The guy assessed her and he said, "Okay, lady, we're going to take you to hospital and check everything out." And she said, "No, I want the horses." And the guy looked at her and said, "Lady, today this is the horse." And they took her away. So it's a long story, but it's a good payoff, I think. And lessons to be learned, like don't plan something that's beyond your capacity, and know how to handle yourself in an emergency. And lady, today this is the horse.